We are we're in a position of, I would say, in a position of power like we've never been before. And I think my hope is that we're able to create a better blueprint as to how to extract these minerals, because one thing we want, and one thing's for certain, we need to reduce greenhouse gases, carbon from our atmosphere, because we are in a self-destructive mode right now.
So, or the plan that you have, or the plan that is put in front of you, is that the brine comes out of the ground and it goes to a secondary processing facility or technology where the lithium is extracted, and then the water goes back down in the ground. So questions that I've seen are that we don't really know how much lithium we can bring up. Is that correct? Do you look at things like this in your planning? Because this is untested technology, right? It's never been done. So do we have a year's worth of lithium, or 2 years, or 5 years? And then if it starts to run thin, do we then have a market incentive to say, let's drill deeper, farther, faster over this fault, this seismic fault? So can you address those issues and how you look at that in the planning going forward, how you plan to approach those kinds of questions? Because these are world-class technology questions, right? I mean, Silicon Valley doesn't have the answers. And it's up to you guys, ultimately, I think.
Yes, definitely. We have an entire community of researchers who are very eager to get the questions and then go out and seek the funding to go and answer those questions. I think we have to be very diligent in how we do this. One is we have to make sure that the type of science that is used, that is helping us solve those problems and respond to those questions in a way that was usable and translatable and implementable. I'll give you an example. As the Salton Sea, a lot of times we refer to it, it's been studied to death. We don't want to study this new industry to death. We want to make sure that if there's limited pool of dollars, right? And researchers are always going to be, in the pressures of publish or perish. And so, yeah, we have to be very diligent and make sure that our communities aren't just being mined for information, but that we have a coordinated approach as to what are those questions that we need answers. And you brought up some of them. How long is this resource there and sustainable? How much quantity? These are questions that I can point to, like one agency that is actually, one entity that is looking at that, and that's the Berkeley Lab. I know they're working on that. I've seen University of Riverside very eager to go out and try to answer some of these questions. There's actually, because very few times do we get opportunities in this corner of the country, of the state. We want to make sure that also our local academic institutions are also helping answer some of those questions. Why? Because it's not going to be the only time we're going to need that type of capacity, especially if we're looking to diversify in our economy. We know that these minerals, that some of them are more difficult to extract. We know that lithium, as far as we've heard from the industry, we've heard from researchers, it is a science. It's not like you're just trying to separate gold or these hard metals from an ore. They got to take it from a liquid to a solid and then to a liquid, and it's very interesting. But I think a lot of this information, at least from the industry side, much of it is being characterized as intellectual property. Now that's where we're going to have some trouble, I think. And the reason why is because the communities have a right to be informed. We need to be informed as to what chemicals are being utilized and what kind of risk are there to release those chemicals into the air, into the water, into our land, that are going to have a harm into our environment, our entire ecosystem, including human health. I'm very confident that the industry is making lots of progress, and some of them are talking about maybe as early as 2 years that they've already been ready to go, sort of full scale, market scale production. Again, I think in some cases we're still trying to convince the federal government, where they have the sort of the larger resources to be able to invest in this industry. I know the state is certainly convinced. You don't have to convince the state because the state wants this. It's really about the federal government, and the federal government a lot of times is making decisions, not really looking at the opportunity here in our own community. But some of the things, and even though I'm not going to be able to answer you the questions that you raised, those are important questions that we're waiting for right now. My name is Luis Olmedo. I am the executive director of Comite, Civico del Valle. We're an organization based in the Imperial County.
Well, let me ask you a question about Imperial County, because as we were talking earlier, the Salton Sea has numerous issues with agricultural pesticides running in there and other chemicals as well. And as the water has evaporated over the years, then, you know, the sand that contains all those chemicals and so forth blows and becomes airborne. So that was really the cause of a lot of problems. Can you describe the way things were a few years ago and how you guys were looking at things and what how you prioritized the needs of the community?
So as an organization, we consider ourselves an environmental justice organization. So we see it from that lens, as well as the fact that we're an organization that was founded by farm workers in the Imperial Valley. This has been our home for the last 35 years. I've been with the organization for 23 years. So I grew up in Imperial Valley, and I've seen the Imperial Valley from being out with my parents, working the fields, and I would say just kind of going through life in the years. And a lot of times we can be very sort of involved in our own sort of day-to-day and not necessarily be seeing air pollution or toxics or where we live and the conditions we live. A lot of times we ignore all of that. And so as someone who's lived here, when I came into Comite Civico del Valle, and this was around 2000, my whole world changed. Everything that was part of the landscape and was normal suddenly was no longer normal. And so some of the early things that I got involved with was around the things then that the blinders go off and you're like, oh, I didn't realize that agricultural burning was a big deal. We see it all the time. We smell it all the time. And it was actually people from, good friends from state departments of public health or the Cali PA or the US EPA, as our network was already there when I got here. A lot of them started kind of pointing things that I was really unaware. And I still remember sitting down with some of some folks that worked at the state at the time. And then it's ag burning season. And so they saw a whole bunch of mushroom clouds with smoke. And it's like, what's going on? Is everything okay? Like, what are all these fires? And I just looked back and I was like, it's ag burning. What are you talking about? Oh, but they were so alarmed. And it was a real reality check for me when I saw their face and their reaction to it. We realized how much we've normalized it. Since then, obviously, as we took a deeper dive into our environment, we realized we don't have the best water quality. We're living next to contaminated and sometimes even Superfund sites that we didn't even know were in our own neighborhood.
So there's not too many lithium sites that are known in North America.
Air pollution, again, sort of became part of our language. We got so involved that we started going out there and connecting to others. I'll tell you, we weren't born with this knowledge. We import a lot of knowledge too, because there's other communities that have done this already. So in the environmental justice, we try to exchange ideas and best practices. And so we started going out there measuring the air, and we started measuring the trucks, how many axles, and we started measuring different parts of the community, like which is the cleaner community, which is the most impacted community. We started getting into understanding the Cleaner Act. We got it to a point where we realized that we kept persistently failing to meet federal standards. These are protections that we as residents, citizens, people who live in this community, we have those protections. And so, in 2010, we actually had to file a lawsuit against the federal government because they were failing to enforce and afford us those protections. And again, 23 years later, I wouldn't say we're necessarily scientists or researchers or experts, but we've been able to build a good team that have brought that expertise and that are working either within our own organization or working contracted. And so we've really built a huge arsenal of expertise to what it is today. And so just as that history of having to learn over these years, we've also have the history of how poor development has happened. Anytime we circumvent the law or our electeds try to cut deals because their metric is jobs, their metric is taxes, well, our metric is holistic. We want to make sure we have good jobs. We want to make sure we have community benefits. And in those jobs, we want labor agreements. We want to make sure that in scenarios as opportunities open up like they are right now with lithium and energy, those minerals are public patrimony. We want to make sure that if we are putting a critical ingredient, that this public patrimony that we feel is a very fair expectation, just like anyone in the business world would expect. If you're an investor, we're investing minerals, we want a profit share out of that. We want to be able to heal all the bad transactions that have happened historically. And we want to diversify our economy so we're not subservient to one industry that then controls our policies, our politics, pretty much our livelihood. No one should have that kind of power. And so right now is a very critical moment to be able to diversify our economy, to create a better path forward. 100 years of agriculture, I appreciate them. I love agriculture, it's nothing to do with that. But we cannot be dependent on one single industry. We need to be able to create other economies here within our own agriculture economy and not necessarily compete with one another. We have room for more.
Can we jump forward to the Lithium Valley Commission? I know that you're serving on that with other representatives. Can you give me a little snapshot of what that commission is and does and who's participating in that?
The Lithium Valley Commission was a great idea. Thanks to our assembly member, we were able to have an opportunity for this commission to carry out a mission, which is to put a report of how this industry could successfully move forward, establish itself, and address many aspects, from the socioeconomics, the environmental, being able to extract these minerals in a sustainable way. So we had a very diverse group of commissioners, and the goal of the commission was met, which is to produce a report. We submitted that report in December, I think in November, December of 2022. So since then, the commission has already been sort of sunset and retired. We made that choice. There's a lot of moving parts to establishing this industry, from the manufacturing to the extraction to the environmental jobs. There's just so many different, and we as a commission, I think we all had a different reason as to we felt that retiring it was the best option. I can tell you what, and I don't share this much, but I'm happy to say as to what my reasons were. It's just I felt that there just wasn't enough representation from the fence line community. We want to make sure that there was a strong, prominent voice from this community, and the commission didn't provide that. And I'm very concerned that everybody's looking out for their interests that they represent. And those interests were very large and expansive in many directions. There were many visions. We want to make sure that we don't repeat the history of other mining towns that have had sort of very short lifespan. There's a lot of extraction, a lot of harm, a lot of benefit, but then the legacy of harm stays behind. And then when that industry's gone, these towns die. We want to make sure that we have more say, more participation in the visioning, in the structure at all levels, from the economics, the jobs, the community benefits, and the profit sharing, the taxes and the way that they get distributed. We have an opportunity of a lifetime here. A lot of times when environmental justice is discussed, there's always this feeling of, oh, they're here to kill projects. And that is the wrong characterization of environmental justice. Our goal is to be able to create and to be able to facilitate, to the extent that we can, a well-balanced economy, a sustainable economy. We don't want too much in any direction. We want to make sure that all parties and all stakeholders are represented, because environmental justice means economic justice. It means jobs justice. It means community benefits justice. All these things that, let me compare it in this way. Everything that is good for a well-established, beautiful communities, and there are many in this country, beautiful communities where they have beautiful landscapes, they have the best education, they have the best tourist attractions, they have the best jobs, they have everything. That's the American dream. And so we shouldn't be then characterized as like, oh, they're anti this or they're anti that. No, we're for everything that is the American dream, but we are not for hoarding dollars for one special interest or eliminating opportunities and assigning harm to disadvantaged, low income or disengaged communities that have barriers in participation. We're not going to be okay with that, because we wouldn't be okay with that for others who participate and have political influence and access. We want the American dream, and the American dream is for everyone. There are going to be waste streams that exist right now just with geothermal. With geothermal, you have 3 classifications of waste, and that's one is it's either hazardous, it's below the hazardous level threshold, or sometimes depending on the mixture of minerals. Have you got some, not toxic minerals, you have some very toxic minerals, and you end up with radioactive material that at times, they have to push the emergency button and get all the cleanup crews in to handle that hazardous waste. What some of the experts are telling us is that if they'd say like in an average day, a day, there's like 20 tons of hazardous materials, that when you, and that hazardous material might be hazardous, might not. When you you go through the lithium processing, 100% of the material is going to be toxic. And it's going to be a minimum of 10 times that size. So in a scenario where you have 20 tons of hazardous materials, well, now you're going to have 200 tons of hazardous materials. And so we want to make sure that part of what we're doing, we're advocating and finding ways to create standards that California has, that the United States has, that are managing the waste cradle to the extent possible. It would be the dream that 100% would be recyclable and manageable. That has to be our goal. We have considerable concerns. We are the perfect candidate to end up with the harm. We're the perfect candidate. We have a community that is considerably ill in comparison to the rest of the state, have people with respiratory problems. When COVID hit, per capita, we had the largest amounts of death and permanent, harm. We also have large unemployment, poverty, It's just all the characteristics of, this is the worst possible conditions. And so we're the perfect candidate as to where companies can really take advantage of. And I would even say that even government can really take advantage of us. Why? Because our expectations are less than, let's say you go to Beverly Hills, or you go to Palm Springs, which is our neighbor to the west, northwest. You know, I've been out there and I've never even seen a fast food place, you know, where you go like drive through, you know. We are taking extra precautions to make sure that we don't end up with the harm, but that we create policies and that we hold those policies to the higher standards so that we end up with the best possible outcome.
Baby, baby, baby.